This is the third attempt at this video. I want to talk about teaching in urban schools and how those classrooms have challenged me more than anything has as a teacher, and how it's also given me, it's given me my lowest lows in a classroom. I had one student when I first started teaching at South Shore High School stand up in front of the whole class. I just asked him to move a seat, and if you're a teacher, you know that is a big deal to ask. I asked him to move a seat, and he refused and stood up and looked me in the eye and said, "You're not my teacher, she's my teacher." And to kind of give you background on that, I was coming in through a private company as an ACT teacher, teaching 2 full days a week at School of Arts, South Shore High School, and the room teacher stayed in the room with me. So it was this direct affront to my authority, both my management authority and frankly my authority as someone who can teach them and help them. And then, on the same token, 6 weeks later, Tim is getting an award for a 4-point score increase, composite, which is a big deal. And, he has his head down now. And I'm like, "Tim, pick up your pencil." And he'll do it. He does it slowly, as all teenagers do when they're going to do what you ask them to do, but at their own pace, just to have a little bit of rebellion in there. But he does it, and he participates in class now. Not every day, I'm not going to lie, but he respects me as an authority figure now. So moving from that, where, again, there was moments in my class where there's just this tornado of noise and energy that I couldn't harness when I first walked into School of Arts, and especially 8th period. Again, props to you teachers who teach in urban schools, and extra props to teachers who teach in urban schools. And the last period of the day, when the kids are tired and less able to control themselves, I guess you would say, and just crazy. They're effing crazy during the last period of the day. And it just felt overwhelming, like I couldn't harness all of that energy to now these moments in the class. And they, honestly, they last, when I'm lucky, they last about 5 minutes. But these quiet moments in a class when I have no one talking, people listening, even people who aren't paying attention, at least they're not talking, and just, people taking notes and participating when they hadn't before. And it is this beautiful transition, and really shows me what myself and other people who love doing this can do in those environments that the task seems so daunting and steep, and it is worth climbing. So I wanted to talk about, in particular, what motivated me to start this was the difference that I'm finding in the 2 urban schools that I've recently been teaching at. So at South Shore High School, the kids are just full of energy and loud, most of them. I have, and again, teachers, this will be like, this is, cliche teacher story, where students are talking and you give them a verbal warning and ask them to stop talking in class because you need them to pay attention. And I wasn't talking. No, I wasn't. Why are you picking at me? I was talking. And it's just like it's the most frustrating thing as a teacher, because it's like, you totally were. Like, I was standing watching you. Like, one of my roommates even suggested that I get out a phone and freaking record them to be like, yaha, you were talking, shut up. Obviously not. I don't speak to them in that way, but I speak to them that way in my head. To flipping out at my kids one day because they just would not listen to me, the entire class. And I used a technique that one of my friends who taught in an urban school for about 4 years as an art teacher, a technique that she gave me. So what I did was I made them do mundane work, which I hated to do, but I made them do mundane work for about 10 minutes, and then I asked them to write why ACT class is important or why it's not important, because I'm willing to listen to whatever your opinion is as long as you're willing to explain it to me. And then if you do think it's important, what you can get out of it, and whether or not your behavior in my class is in line with reaching your goals, your ACT goals in this case. And that really, that was like, I didn't do that with any class except for that 8th period class, and that was a really big turning point in that class. for me where students began to argue less with me. It did not go away, it has not gone away, but they argue less with me. And they in general, again, respect me more as an authority figure. One of my girls, when we discussed why I had them write it and all that junk, was like, well, you don't have to be here, like, we appreciate it. And that wasn't what I was looking for, but it was nice to hear. And the same girl during the next class, and her name is Andrea. She's a talker. She's got a saucy personality. She'll have words with whoever attempts to have words with her. So a lot of it is like stopping what I call bickering, which sounds louder than normal bickering, but bickering in class between students or groups of students or whatever. And one day she's talking in class and she kind of starts that, and I go, Andrea, for warning, I need you to stop talking. And she goes, you're right, I was talking. And it was like, victory! You did not deny what everyone in this room who was watching you would have seen you doing. That was amazing. So at School of Arts, again, I've been there 2 full days a week. I've had kids towards the end. I was doing it at the beginning, but towards the end, I started having kids come to me during their lunch periods for private tutoring. I wasn't getting paid the full amount to do that, but obviously that doesn't matter. If I have someone who wants to learn, is willing to learn, actively seeks it, I'm there. And that's really allowed me to understand my students, get to know them. For one of my recommendations, I'm applying to an urban teacher residency right now, and one of my recommendations by the teacher whose room I take over these 2 days a week wrote that I was actually able to get a student, one of her most reluctant and quiet students, to talk to me over a tutoring session. And it was the first time apparently she'd seen him work all semester. And the first time when I read it, I cried, I'm not going to lie, because Marvin was a kid who I could not even try to manage when I was first at School of Arts, because I was just trying to establish myself as an authority figure, period, let alone the kids who require extra effort from me to engage them. And he was what I would call a wayfaring student. He drifted in and out of class. I mean, there are times literally when kids would leave my class and I didn't even notice, which is really terrible and something that I have since worked on. Pay attention to that stuff. He wanders around the school during lunch. During the 2 periods I have free, when me and Mr. Rumigum, the room teacher again, would be talking about the kids or whatever, he would walk in. He'd be like, Marvin, you can't be here without a pass. He'd walk out. Then we started saying, well, if you sit here and do work with me, you can stay here. And a couple times he would sit down, and I would get that ACT book out, and motherfucker picked up and left by the time I turned around and walked back to where we were going to sit. He did not want to do it. He's like, nope. And then one day last week, granted, it was during grades week, when grades were due and everyone was, obviously making up work and stuff. He came in, and Mr. Rumigum again offered, you can stay here if you work with Miss P. And he did. He sat down, and we did 3 or 4 English problems, and he got 1 or 2 right out of 5, but he kept being like, see, I'm smart. And it was this being smart is important to him. That's why he kept saying it. And I think that sometimes it seems as if the kids don't care, but even this kid who refused to do work under any circumstances, even being smart, being good at school, and I hate the word smart, but that's another, I guess, YouTube post, it even mattered to him. And he told me about how he wants to be a mortician, which I wasn't sure, and I asked him why, and he said because he's used to being around dead bodies. Should I just stop there and let that digest? I didn't react to that when he told me, because I wasn't sure if he was, I don't trust teenagers, so I wasn't sure if he was trying to get a rise out of me, to be like, all right, this teacher wants to reach me, I'll give her something to reach. So I didn't really react, but I just kind of asked questions, and told me that he worked at a funeral home. His family owns a funeral home, and he worked on the Bernie Mac funeral, which he told me, we would be talking about something else. I would ask him a question about a completely different topic, and he would answer with, no, the Bernie Mac funeral, I worked at it, and it was and so clearly something important to him. And that was it. I mean, it was very short. He didn't offer a whole lot of info, but it's something that I'm proud of, and something that is one of those anecdotes that motivates me to want to work in urban schools, because it's so effing cool to get to reach a student. I mean, I have not changed his life in any way. I know that he's on the same path he was on before I arrived. Whether that's a good path or a bad path, I don't even know. But that I could, given more time and tools and training, and my own classroom. So that's one thing, and that's School of Arts. Then I'm also teaching at Richards High School, which is in a more Hispanic / African American neighborhood, 51st and Ashland. And those kids, they're not loud. I rarely have to ask them to stop speaking or to stop talking. There's this freaking apathy, this like dripping apathy that permeates the class. So at School of Arts, one way I've gotten the kids to do their homework is by having it count toward their actual grade, so their English grade for the class that I'm taking over. And I did the same thing at Richards when I realized it worked at School of Arts, except it doesn't work at Richards High School. The kids, I still get, out of like 17 kids, I still get like 3 homework assignments every day, like if I'm lucky, and 3 are like rotating between like 6 or 7 students who actually do their homework, but just who don't do it consistently. And that's what scares the shit out of me. At Richards, I'm there 1 period, 2 times a week. I've not been able to cultivate relationships with the students nor the teachers. I've really grown into School of Arts, where I haven't been able to do that at Richards. And it's really fascinating, and something that I think is important in terms of urban teaching, because urban teaching is difficult. But obviously, I mean, I'm sure any urban teacher who probably won't be, but might be watching this, already knew this, but something that I'm learning is that there are different kinds of difficulty. At School of Arts, it's harnessing the energy and dealing with kids getting into fights, verbal fights mainly, one physical fight, whatever. And just this energy, and in Richards, just this like deadened, like the kids don't give a crap. They're also more prone to be mean to me, as a teacher. So for instance, they'll lie to me, like that kind of thing you expect how students will treat a substitute teacher is how they treated me when I first got there. So like one student told me his name was Steven, his name is really Gerardo. Guess what I'm calling you for the rest of the semester? Steven, because I don't give a crap. Like, you want to mess around? I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. And so even though he writes Gerardo on his papers, I just cross it out and I write Steven. That's how I roll as a teacher, apparently. But yeah, it's really, I wonder if I had been able to be invested as much at Richards as I was at School of Arts, whether or not that would have made a difference. But, whether or not I was, it would have been an entirely different challenge. I had one girl, Armesia, who is incredibly difficult, called me a bitch in class one time, which I don't really care about. I had one student at School of Arts tell me I shouldn't be a teacher one day, and I wanted to that's what got under my skin. Call me a bitch as much as you want, because frankly, I am one, even though I do not show it to you, and I did not warrant being called that. I'll show you a bitch. I'm just kidding. But Armesia said, why should we worry, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, why should we worry about this stupid test when we're not even going to be able to go to college, when we can just sell drugs instead? I literally stood in class and was like, it was really difficult, and I obviously gave a response, and frankly, I don't even remember what the response was. I mean, obviously it was something touting education and its importance in your life and stuff like that, but I mean, I always know what you say